Hello and welcome to the Play Review with me, Douglas Schatz.
And me, Jodi Rylett.
Hi, Jodi.
Hi, Douglas.
Yeah, I'm sorry it's been a bit of a while since I've seen you. And in fact, I have been to the theater quite a lot, so we have a lot to catch up on.
We do.
So today we're going to talk about Dealer's Choice by Patrick Marber, which is currently playing at the Donmar Warehouse in London. It is Marber's first play, which he wrote in 1995, and it was a great success when it premiered at the National Theatre, winning the Evening Standard Award for Best Comedy. Marber went on to write Closer 2 years later, followed by Don Juan in Soho, 3 Days in the Country, and The Red Lion, and he is also, of course, a very successful director. This 30th anniversary production is directed by Matthew Dunster, with some revisions to the original text, which, contrary to what one might assume, were not to clean up outdated language. In fact, the show is explicitly set in 1995, the date being projected on the wall of the theatre to make that clear to us. The play is set in a London restaurant where the proprietor and his staff are in the routine of playing poker every Sunday evening after the restaurant closes. In one way or another, all of the men involved, and they are all men, are addicted to the gamble of the game, hoping to win big and change their lives, but mainly losing and finding themselves in revolving debt to each other and the boss. The first half of the play introduces us to the 6 players in that night's game: the proprietor Stephen and his 20-something-year-old son Carl, 3 of the restaurant's employees, Sweeney the chef and Frankie and Muggsy, who are waiters and general dogs buddies, I think, and finally a mystery guest, a man named Ash, who turns up at the restaurant looking for Carl because it turns out Carl owes him £4,000 in gambling debts, which his father knows nothing about. Each of these characters has important reasons why they want to win money in the game. In the second half, we watch the game being played out over a number of hours. Now, this play very much centers around an actual poker game. So my first question for you, Jodi, is, do you think you have to know much about poker to enjoy this show, to follow what's going on? Because they do actually play cards.
Yeah, you do not, because I don't, and I did follow it. But much like Dear England, we don't have to be a football fan to get the drama of that play. I think if you are a poker player, you would feel it a lot more.
Yes, well, I agree. I don't think that you have to know the rules of poker or the detail of what card is laid when to understand what is at stake for each of the characters as the sequence of hands is played out.
Yeah, that's true. And it's something we see in movies all the time.
True. And there's an inherent suspense, I think, in the hands of a game like that. But we get why it's important to each of them, and even why they lose, because generally they all lose to Ash, who they don't realize is a professional poker player. And I read somewhere David Mamet said, poker is all about character. And I think one of the strengths of the show and the play is that the personality of each of these characters is very much on display in how they behave in the game.
Yeah, it is. It's such a good metaphor, isn't it? The game of life, the stakes, the win-lose, the cycles that we go in, the way to reveal relationships and dependencies. It's gambling full stop is a good premise for any sort of drama.
Yeah, Matthew Dunster. So I was lucky enough to talk with Matthew about the play in some length on the Play podcast recently. And he said, life is risk.
Mm-hmm.
So he said the play is a crystallization of that idea, and poker becomes the metaphoric forum for that. I mentioned Mamet. I also thought the language and the dynamic of the play reminded me of Mamet, especially of Glengarry Glen Ross. It's also about men competing in the workplace with the same quick-fire banter and one-upmanship that goes on. And I talked at the beginning about the fact it's set in 1995. Did you feel that there was any element of it that was dated, or how did you respond to that and the men's interaction and their language, for example?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. It did feel dated. Look, I often ask on revivals, I would ask, why? Why are we seeing this play again now? Of all the plays, the wonderful plays that we could bring back, why this one? And I didn't get any sort of current resonance in it. What bothered me more than the kind of dated language, because I get that, and it was very firmly set in the 90s, and it's good for us to see how we may or may not have moved on. I did find the intense masculinity of the setting quite off-putting and alienating for me, which took me a while to settle into and maybe gave me more distance from the characters than it should have done. And look, that's just a personal response. The way that they're, in a way, being invited into this all-male environment where there aren't any women around to maybe temper behaviors and languages and so on it was interesting. It was almost anthropological. Why are they swearing and shouting and being so vile to each other? And then 20 seconds later, are you all right, mate? You're my best mate and I love you. I mean, it felt really realistic.
I'm not sure how dated that is, Jodi.
Yeah, precisely. So I think some of the language felt dated, but I think we're kidding ourselves in any way if we think that that is not how men can interact when they're in that all-male environment. I've got a house full of builders at the moment, and they're always shouting at each other.
Though, there you go. You see, that's what goes on. There's a really competitive edge, one-upmanship, and this sort of banter that's going on, this kind of posturing. I think that's sort of timeless, I'm afraid.
It is timeless, and I did feel it was super realistic. I mean, the writing, the dialogue is so quick, and it felt sometimes in plays you can feel a character sort of speechifying or talking on behalf of the writer. I didn't really detect any of that in this. It felt very realistic in that sense. But for all this, I am also left a little bit going, but so what? What is it telling me about male friendships and male relationships? What am I learning about them?
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I agree with you. The language is very sharp and funny and fluent. It feels very natural and real, not overly writerly, as you say. And in fact, it is very funny. And funniest of all is Hamad Inishwan, who plays Muggsy.
What a joy.
Yeah, yeah.
If you can get a ticket, it's worth it just to see him. My heart went to him and I loved him so much. And it was so funny.
Yeah, I wrote the very phrase down. For my money, it's worth the price of admission on its own, his performance. He plays Muggsy, the put-upon head waiter who has a dream to open a restaurant in a disused public toilet in the Mile End Road.
Mile End Road.
Which the rest of them think is a mad idea and may have been 30 years ago, but ironically now feels not too stupid, actually. But anyway, he is the butt of all their jokes and an inveterate loser in the game, but who all of them remains positive and hopeful come what may. And it's just a wonderful, big-hearted, larger-than-life performance. Yeah, he was fabulous and carries a lot of the energy and positivity of the play, I think. Can we talk about the rest of the cast? Who did you like or otherwise?
No one else particularly stood out for me, really. I would have liked Brendan Coyle's Ash to have had more danger. He had initially a degree of menace. So he's the outsider who's invited in with Carl, the son of the proprietor of the restaurant, to whom we learn Carl's in debt for gambling debts, and he's the stranger in the midst. He's the dangerous presence, but it never delivered on the promise. I mean, because he's such a big man.
Yes.
And he had a quiet menace at the beginning when he sat at that table, like the power that he exuded. And I just wanted that to explode more than it did, although his unraveling of Stephen does come, just not in the way I guess I was expecting.
Well, yes, I felt a bit of that as well, although he is suitably taciturn at the beginning, and that makes him somewhat scary. And as you say, his bulk adds to the threat. He's, in theory, a big-time player. He's a pro poker player who plays in a big-time game and is in even bigger debt elsewhere. In fact, he owes £10,000 and he needs that money tonight. So he's operating in a dangerous world, in fact, himself. But I think maybe what comes out is that he's also a bit of a sad case because he is a loser, right? He's the one in debt. He's divorced, lives in a bedsit by himself.
It's tragic.
Yeah. So there's an element of that undermines that sense of threat.
That's true. And Carl idolizes him. He lost everything in one game. But that's something to look up to.
I think that's somewhat misplaced. But his father, Stephen, would certainly say Carl's affections or values are misplaced because at the heart of the play is the relationship between Stephen and Carl, father and son. And I think that's very well drawn. The father who is frustrated with his hapless son and trying, as all fathers do, to over-control him. And in fact, I thought Daniel Lepane captured this combination of being supremely confident in his position. He's the boss, but also he's got this sort of suppressed compulsions, right? Because he has an addiction to the gambling. And also, of course, the one person he can't control, being a control freak, is his son. And he's really irritating. There are a lot of it in his condescension and the way he behaves towards the others. But ultimately, I think he also reveals a weakness, which is kind of moving, actually, the way he's failed to properly address his son and his own gambling addictions.
Yeah, he did play all of that beautifully. And essentially, if this play has any stakes, pardon the pun, it should be the father-son relationship. And I don't know, I think Carl's role was maybe a bit underwritten because Casper Hilton Hill is an astonishing actor. And I still didn't get the emotional punch of what was going on between the two of them. I wanted to care much more about Carl and what became of him than I really did. At the very end, he walks off up the stairs and, see you next week, he says to his dad, and his dad says, your choice. And I felt neither hope that he would come back and carry on a relationship with his father, nor hope that he didn't go back and stopped gambling and did something else with his life.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think there was more to that, and that something has moved on between them as a result of what's happened that night. And we don't want to give too much away, and that he will probably be back, but the terms have changed between them.
Yeah, I definitely got that shift. And I should caveat this by saying I saw this really early on in previews. So who knows, something may have intensified in some of the ways they played this.
Well, yeah, I thought he had a suitably desperate edge of one who is trapped, both by his own behavior, because he's in big debt and he's addicted to gambling, but also thrashing against his dependence on his father. And he's flailing around a bit without a clear future.
Yeah, and all of that was definitely, recognizable and real enough. I guess I just would have liked him to have had more to do, I think is fundamentally it.
Yeah. Okay. So the other two are Theo Barklam Biggs is Sweeney, the chef, and like Stephen, I guess, is containing a furnace of anger and despair, for example, at the breakdown of his marriage and lack of contact with his 5-year-old daughter, who his ex-wife is not allowing him to see very frequently. And initially appears to be the most disciplined of these backroom lads, but we know that he cannot stop himself drinking or gambling. And there's a moment when he gives Frankie his last 50 pounds in the first part of the play, telling him not to let him have it in the game. And we know
it's the gun, isn't it?
Yeah, that isn't going to turn out well. His humiliation is pretty hard to watch, actually. I found that quite moving as well.
That was, again, I felt like I intellectually got that moment and its importance more than I felt it emotionally at the point of him asking for the 50. His breakdown was amazing and I felt it fully, but I would have liked a little bit more wrestle in that moment with conscience.
That's a good point. I think the more humiliating is when Stephen gives him 50 pounds.
It's crushing.
Having just destroyed him.
Yeah, it's so infantilizing and emasculating. And I mean, what is left for, oh.
Yeah, you feel for him. And finally, Alfie Allen is the cocksure Frankie, who is reportedly a success with the ladies and has booked a one-way ticket to Vegas to become a pro poker player. His downfall is also quite poignant. He's taught a hard lesson by a real pro, the mystery man, Ash, and that breaks him. And I guess you could sort of see that coming too. You never believe he's really going to go or certainly be a success in Vegas, do you?
No, you don't. And it's that crushing moment where he realizes he's nowhere near good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you a bit about the staging. The first half, there's an open stage split between the front of house and the kitchen, and the scenes flow seamlessly between these two spaces. And then at the interval, there's a sort of coup de theatre, isn't there?
Oh, it's so great. I wondered because I was sat downstairs in the stalls and I was thinking, when this famous poker game starts, I'm not going to see what's going on. And then in the interval, I stayed and the crew came on and they started attaching these really heavyweight chains and winches to the set. And It was great. I just love the technical side of theatre.
I don't know why I'm so simply thrilled by some of these mechanics of theater, but it was pretty thrilling. And I'm sorry we've probably given a spoiler here because they keep talking about the fact that the poker game is going to be played in the basement. And my son and I came back from the interval, and the stage was still set the same as the first half with the restaurant tables and the kitchen, etc. I thought, well, where's the basement? How are they doing this? And then bang, they transformed the whole thing. Also, I liked that the round table they played the game on was revolving, underlining the passing of time over several hours, and perhaps even the circular repetitions of winning and losing to each other and the treadmill of the gambling that they can't stop, all of that. It does stop, I think, at least once when things get very tense.
Yeah, and also purely practically. If actors are static at a table, we want to show everybody in the audience, everybody get their fair share of characters.
Correct. And in fact, I would give credit to Matthew Dunster. I think the whole piece is very sharply directed. There's a very clear definition of each character and the stakes involved.
It really is. Yeah. And the use of seriously loud 1990s tracks. I heard your interview with him, and he'd said that after a couple of the first previews, they actually projected the date at the very beginning of the show. I thought, wow, how could anybody ever be in any doubt that this is precisely when this was set? Because the music is so loud and insistent.
Yes. Yeah, well, that takes us all the way back to the beginning, I suppose, as to how does this stand up after 30 years? And I think you probably think less so than I do. I really enjoyed the play and, in fact, the performances and production and would recommend seeing it.
Yeah. And I would also, all of those things. It is a great piece of theatre and it's a beautifully written, well-structured play. Definitely go and see it. It was just for me, I think if it were written today, even if set in the 90s, more would have been made of the male friendship that sat underneath the tensions. Because, I heard you speaking to Matthew Dunster about the kind of relationship between the characters, almost like brothers. And I didn't get that.
Okay. I mean, maybe for the benefit of hindsight in that conversation, I did detect some strengths of feeling there, Sweeney in particular, because I think he needs his workmates there.
Maybe between Sweeney and Frankie, yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Jodi. Dealer's Choice continues at the Donmar until the 7th of June, so you still have a chance to see it. And for anyone who would like to hear more about the play and how Matthew and Patrick worked together to mount this anniversary production, including how the cast learned how to play poker for real money and much more, you can listen to my in-depth conversation with Matthew on the latest episode of the Play Podcast. Thanks again, Jodi. There are several other shows we've got to catch up on, so we'll see you soon. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time.
See you soon. Bye.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please visit theplaypodcast.com to share your comments or email us at plays@theplaypodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.